Good evening, everyone. I'm Kate Morrison, and this is harder than I thought it would be. I've been coming to this support group for 3 months now, but tonight feels different. Tonight, I want to tell you about Humphrey. Before I begin, I want you to know something. Whether you're here because you lost a pet, a service animal, or you're just curious about our world, your feelings are valid. And I want you to know that at the end of this evening, I'm going to ask you to share something. Anything that you need to get off your chest. This is a safe space, leave it in the comment section. And sometimes the most healing thing we can do is speak our truth into the darkness. The statistics say there are about 10,000 guide dog teams in the United States right now. Worldwide, maybe 20,000. We're a small but mighty community. But tonight isn't about statistics. Tonight is about the space between heartbeats, the silence after the last bark, and the courage it takes to keep walking when your world has fundamentally changed. Before Humphrey. Let me paint you a picture of my life before Humphrey. I was 28, had been blind since birth. Congenital glaucoma if you're keeping track, and I was stubborn. God, was I stubborn. I navigated downtown Chicago with a white cane like I was conducting an orchestra of urban chaos. Bus brakes, construction sounds, the click-clack of heels on pavement. All my instruments. I was independent, sure, but I was also exhausted. Every trip to the grocery store was a military operation. Every new route required 3 practice runs. I'd memorize 47 steps to the crosswalk, listen for the east-west traffic, mind the construction barrel that's been there since the Clinton administration. My orientation and mobility instructor, Sarah, kept suggesting I consider a guide dog. Kate, she'd say, you're wearing yourself out. But I thought guide dogs were for people who couldn't handle independence. I thought they were giving up. I was wrong about so many things. The application process for guide dogs is no joke. It's more thorough than applying for the CIA. Medical records, psychological evaluations, mobility assessments. They want to know everything. How do you handle stress? What's your daily routine? Do you have carpet or hardwood floors? Are you a morning person or a night owl? I applied to guide dogs for the blind in California. The waiting list was 2 years. 2 years. I almost backed out 6 times. But something kept pulling me forward. Maybe it was the interview with Jennifer, the placement counselor. She asked me, "What do you hope to gain from a guide dog partnership?" And I gave her the standard answer. Increased mobility, independence, safety. But she pressed deeper. What do you hope to feel with a guide dog? And for the first time I said something honest. Less alone. That was the moment I knew I was ready. Not because I needed help walking, I could walk just fine. But because I needed help living. July 15, 2015. San Rafael, California. Guide dogs for the Blind Training Center. I remember everything about that day. The smell of eucalyptus trees, the sound of dozens of dogs barking in the distance, the nervous energy of 12 students all about to meet their matches. They brought him in during our second day. Kate, the instructor said, meet Humphrey. And I heard these massive paws padding across the linoleum, this gentle panting, and then this enormous warm head just thunked against my leg. Not gentle, not careful, just pure, unapologetic golden retriever enthusiasm. I reached down to pet him, and he immediately rolled over for belly rubs. Right there in the middle of training class. The instructor was mortified. Humphrey, working position. But I was laughing harder than I had in months. This dog, this professional, trained, serious working dog, was still fundamentally a goofball who wanted his belly scratched. I knew in that moment. Not because he was perfect, but because he was perfectly imperfect. Like me. The first time I put this harness on him, I felt something I'd never experienced before. Connection. Not just physical, yes, through the rigid handle I could feel his breathing, his pace, his attention. But it was deeper than that. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had a true partner. The research shows that guide dog partnerships typically last 8 to 10 years. On average, guide dogs usually retire between the ages of 8 and 10 years old. But nobody tells you that from day one, you're essentially signing up for a love story with a predetermined ending. Learning to work with a guide dog isn't like learning to drive a car. It's like learning to dance with a partner who speaks a different language, but somehow always knows which way you want to go. The first week was disaster after disaster. I'd tell him forward, and he'd stop for a curb I couldn't see. I'd get frustrated. Humphrey, I said, forward. But he was already doing his job, protecting me from a 3-inch drop that could have twisted my ankle. This is the thing about guide dogs that people don't understand. They're not furry GPS systems. They're making dozens of decisions every minute. Is this obstruction worth going around? Is this crowd too dense? Is that person walking toward us distracted by their phone? Humphrey had this thing he did with texting pedestrians. He'd see them coming, zombie walking, eyes glued to their screens, and he'd just stop. Full stop. Then he'd position himself between me and them, like a golden retriever bodyguard. I'd hear them bump into him instead of me, and there'd be this moment of, "Oh God, I'm so sorry, I didn't see you." Humphrey saved me from about 2,000 phone zombies over the years. He deserved a medal. Or at least an unlimited belly rub account. After those first few months, something magical happened. We found our rhythm. Not just the walking rhythm, though that was beautiful, this perfectly synchronized pace that felt like dancing, but the rhythm of life together. Morning routine. Humphrey would wake me up at exactly 6:15 a.m., not with barking or paw batting, but by pressing his nose against my hand and doing this tiny whine that sounded like, "Good morning, Kate, it's time to be awesome." He'd guide me to the kitchen, where he'd position himself exactly where I needed to step to reach the coffee maker. Not in front of it, not beside it, in the exact spot where I could reach out and touch the on button. Every single day for 9 years. People ask me all the time, what's the most important thing a guide dog does? And they expect me to say navigation or obstacle avoidance. But the truth, the most important thing Humphrey did was make me feel normal. When you're blind, you're constantly managing other people's discomfort with your disability. People speak louder, they grab your arm without asking. They ask your companion what you want to eat instead of asking you. But when I walked with Humphrey, something shifted. Children would ask, "Can I pet your dog?" And I'd explain about working dogs, and they'd listen. Adults would see us navigating a crowded subway platform and think, "Look how capable she is," instead of "Look how helpless she is." Humphrey didn't just guide me through the world. He changed how the world saw me. And maybe more importantly, he changed how I saw myself. Nobody tells you that your guide dog is going to become your therapist. But Humphrey knew my emotions better than I did. Bad day at work. He'd press closer to my leg on the walk home. Anxiety about a presentation. He'd rest his head on my lap while I practiced my speech. First date jitters. He'd do this thing where he'd wag his tail just a little bit harder, like he was saying, "You got this, Kate." The worst was when my dad got sick. Cancer. I was flying back and forth to Minnesota every few weeks, and Humphrey, he just knew. He'd position himself between me and the airplane seat, creating this little cocoon of calm. Flight attendants would bend the rules about working dogs because they could see what he was doing. When Dad died, I came home and just collapsed. Right there on the kitchen floor. Just sat down and cried. And Humphrey did something he'd never done before and never did again. He climbed into my lap. All 75 pounds of him. Just wrapped himself around me like a golden retriever blanket and stayed there for 2 hours. The research shows that guide dogs provide emotional support beyond their mobility function. Animal companion loss can have a wide-ranging impact on bereaved owners. For some individuals, the grief response experienced following animal companion loss may be akin to that experienced following human bereavement. But they don't capture the daily magic of having a being who reads your soul. Oh, but let me tell you about the glory days. Years 4 through 7. When Humphrey and I were absolutely unstoppable. We traveled to 23 states together. We navigated airports like we owned them. We hiked portions of the Appalachian Trail. Yes, with a guide dog, it's possible if you're careful. Humphrey loved showing off. New York City. Please. He'd weave through Times Square crowds like he was conducting a symphony. Chicago's Loop during rush hour. Child's Play. He'd find the gaps between people that I couldn't even sense. This smooth, efficient navigation that made me feel like I was gliding. He had his favorite places. The farmer's market on Saturdays. He knew every vendor, and they all saved him treats. The bookstore on 5th Street, where he'd lead me directly to the biography section because he knew that's where I'd spend an hour browsing. And the confidence he gave me professionally. I got promoted 3 times during our partnership. Not because having a guide dog made me more capable, but because having Humphrey made me believe I was more capable. Those were the golden years. Literally and figuratively. When everything clicked. When we moved through the world like we were made for each other. When I forgot that walking with a dog was anything unusual because it felt like the most natural thing in the world. I should have known it couldn't last forever. But when you're living in that much joy, that much partnership, that much love, you don't think about endings. You just think about tomorrow's walk. The first sign wasn't dramatic. It was barely noticeable, really. We were walking to the grocery store, a route we'd done literally thousands of times, and Humphrey hesitated at a curb. Not stopped, not refused. Just hesitated. I thought maybe he'd seen something I couldn't perceive. A puddle, a loose sidewalk tile, who knows? But the next day he did it again. Same curb. Same tiny hesitation. Then I noticed he was breathing harder on our longer walks. Not dramatically harder, but I knew his breathing the way you know your own heartbeat. Something was different. The vet said it was normal aging. Humphrey was 8.5. That's getting up there for a larger dog. Some joint stiffness, maybe some fatigue. Nothing to worry about yet. Just monitor it. Yet. I hated that word. It implied a future I wasn't ready to consider. I became obsessed with signs. Every hesitation, every slower step, every moment he chose to lie down instead of staying at perfect heel position. I started keeping a journal. Tuesday. Humphrey stopped for an extra second at the bank entrance. Wednesday. He guided me around a trash can instead of through the gap he usually takes. I convinced myself I could fix it. Better food. I switched to the most expensive organic dog food I could find. More supplements, glucosamine, fish oil, whatever the internet suggested. I even took him to a canine massage therapist. A massage therapist. For a dog. I researched everything. Acupuncture for dogs. Hydrotherapy. Special boots for his paws. I spent $3,000 in 4 months trying to turn back time. But the worst part wasn't the money. It was the way Humphrey looked at me during all these treatments. Like he was saying, "Kate, I'm trying my best. I'm still here. I'm still working. Why are you so scared?" Because I knew. Deep down I knew what was coming. And I wasn't ready to be brave. Dr. Martinez, Humphrey's vet, was the one who finally said it. "Kate, we need to talk about retirement." Retirement. Such a gentle word for such a devastating concept. He wasn't dying, not yet, but he was slowing down enough that his ability to keep me safe was compromised. When clients had lost a guide dog, whether by retirement or death, they had usually been together for about 8 years. The dog had been considered as a member of the family. The guide dog school's placement counselor, Jennifer, remember her, came to evaluate our partnership. She watched us work for 2 hours. Professional, thorough, kind. And at the end she said what I already knew. "Humphrey's still a good dog, Kate. But he's not a guide dog anymore." The timeline was 6 months. 6 months to prepare for retirement, to apply for a new dog, to figure out what the hell I was going to do with my life when the most important relationship I'd ever had came to an end. 6 months to say goodbye to the being who had been my eyes, my confidence, my partner, my friend. 6 months to figure out how to keep living when half of my identity was about to disappear. And that's when everything started falling apart. I want to tell you about the day I realized I was losing myself along with Humphrey. It was a Tuesday in March. We were walking to the coffee shop, our morning routine for 9 years, and Humphrey stopped in the middle of the crosswalk. Not hesitated. Full stop. In the middle of traffic. I could hear cars idling, people walking around us, the crossing signal beeping. And Humphrey was just standing there, panting, looking up at me with these eyes that seemed to say, "I'm sorry, Kate. I can't do this anymore." I picked him up. Right there in the middle of the street. 75 pounds of golden retriever, and I just lifted him. Carried him to the sidewalk while drivers honked and pedestrians stared. My back was screaming, my arms were shaking, but I couldn't leave him there. That's when I knew. It wasn't just that he was retiring. It was that I was about to lose everything that made me. Me. I started canceling things. Work meetings that required travel. social events that involved navigation, dates, though there weren't many of those anyway. I told myself I was just being cautious, giving Humphrey time to rest. But really I was terrified. Terrified of being seen as helpless again. Terrified of going back to the white cane, to the exhaustion, to the constant vigilance. Terrified of other people's pity. I started having panic attacks. Real ones. Heart racing, can't breathe, the whole deal. Always when I thought about navigating alone. The grocery store became impossible. The subway was out of the question. I ordered everything online, had groceries delivered, worked from home. I was disappearing, becoming smaller and smaller, until my world was just my apartment, my couch, and a dog who was trying so hard to still be my eyes even though his body was failing him. And that's when Humphrey made the decision for both of us. May 2nd, 2025. I'll never forget that date. I woke up, and Humphrey wasn't beside the bed. He was always beside the bed. For 9 years, 3 months and 12 days. He had been beside the bed every morning at 6:15 a.m. I found him in the kitchen, lying on his side, breathing hard. Not emergency hard, but labored. Like every breath was work. I knelt down beside him, and he lifted his head just enough to look at me. And in that look I saw everything. All the love, all the partnership, all the years of guiding me through the world. But I also saw permission. Like he was saying, "Kate, I've done everything I can. It's time." The vet said it was congestive heart failure. Treatable but not curable. We could manage it for a while, but his working days were over. His running days were over. His hiking days were over. Dr. Martinez said we had maybe 6 months. Maybe a year if we were lucky. But they wouldn't be active months. They'd be waiting months. I want to tell you about the hardest decision I've ever made. Harder than deciding to get a guide dog. Harder than moving to a new city. Harder than anything. I could have kept him. Given him medications, made him comfortable. Let him live out his days as a pet instead of a working dog. The vet said that was completely reasonable. Many people do it. But I kept thinking about that look in his eyes. Not the permission to let go, but the other thing I saw there. Pride. 9 years of pride in his work, in our partnership, in the life we'd built together. Humphrey was never just a pet. He was a professional. A working dog who had dedicated his entire life to keeping me safe. Helping me navigate, being my partner. The idea of him spending his final months unable to work, unable to be who he was. I couldn't do that to him. So I made a choice. Not just for me but for him. For the dignity of the partnership we'd shared. May 15th, 2025. Dr. Martinez came to the house. I'd requested that. Humphrey had given me 9 years of working in harness, going wherever I needed to go. The least I could do was let him be comfortable at the end. I put this on him one last time. Not for work, just because it was ours. Our symbol. Our connection. We took one last walk. Just around the block. Humphrey was slow, but he was still guiding. Still positioning himself between me and obstacles. Still doing his job, even when breathing was hard. At the corner by the coffee shop, our coffee shop, he stopped. And he looked up at me. And I swear I could hear him thinking, "We did good, didn't we, Kate? We did really good." And I said, "Yes, buddy. We did perfect." Dr. Martinez was so gentle. Humphrey was in my arms, and I was telling him what a good boy he was, what a good partner he'd been, how much I loved him. And he just slept, peaceful, like he was finally allowed to rest. The research tells us that if the dog had died suddenly, the grief could be more intense. If the dog had retired or died, it was often hard to want a new dog. But research doesn't capture the moment when your world fundamentally shifts. When the being who has been your other half for nearly a decade is just gone. The silence was the worst part. Not the absence of barking. Humphrey was a professional, he rarely barked. But the absence of presence. No breathing beside my bed. No footsteps padding across the kitchen floor. No harness sounds when I reached for the door. I didn't leave the apartment for 3 days. Not because I couldn't. I still had my cane, my mobility skills. But because every time I thought about walking out that door without him, I felt like I was betraying our partnership. And the dreams. God, the dreams. Every night I'd dream we were working together again. Perfect partnership, perfect communication, perfect love. And every morning I'd wake up and remember all over again. The Association for Pet Loss and Bereavement, APLB, is a non-profit organization staffed by volunteers trained in pet bereavement counseling. Call them on day 4. The counselor, her name was Maria, asked me a question that broke me open. "Kate, what are you most afraid of?" And I said, "I'm afraid I'll forget how to be brave without him." That's how I ended up here. In this room with all of you. Maria suggested a pet loss support group, and I almost hung up. "I didn't lose a pet," I said. "I lost my partner." But she said something that stuck with me. Grief doesn't care what kind of relationship you lost. It just cares that you loved deeply. Loved deeply. The first meeting was terrifying. I sat in the back, clutched my cane, and listened to people talk about their cats and their parrots and their horses. And I thought, these people don't understand. Their animals didn't guide them through the world. But then Eleanor, some of you remember Eleanor, talked about her service dog Max. And she said something that changed everything. The depth of our grief isn't about the type of relationship we lost. It's about the love we shared. And I realized we all loved deeply. We all lost partners. We all had to figure out how to keep living when half of our identity was gone. So I started talking. About Humphrey, about partnership, about the fear of being helpless again. And you all listened. You didn't try to fix me or rush me or tell me to get another dog. You just witnessed my grief. And slowly, week by week, I started to remember something important. I wasn't just half of a partnership. I was a whole person who had been blessed with an extraordinary relationship. Healing isn't linear. That's something they don't tell you in the grief books. I'd have a good day, feel proud of navigating the grocery store with my cane, and then I'd pass a golden retriever on the street and completely fall apart. But somewhere around month 3, something shifted. I was walking to the coffee shop, our coffee shop, and I realized I wasn't thinking about Humphrey's absence. I was thinking about the barista's new hairstyle, the sound of the espresso machine, the smell of cinnamon rolls. I was present. Not perfectly, not constantly, but present. In my own life, in my own body, in my own experience of the world. And that's when I understood something crucial. Humphrey hadn't just given me mobility. He'd given me confidence. And that confidence, that belief in my own capability, it was still there. It was mine to keep. There were gifts in the grief. Unexpected ones. Without Humphrey, I had to relearn my neighborhood. Really learn it, not just follow his guidance. I discovered stores I'd never noticed. Shortcuts I'd never taken, sounds I'd never heard. I started volunteering at guide dogs for the blind. Not as a trainer, I'm not qualified for that, but as a mentor for new handlers. Helping people navigate those first terrifying weeks with their new partners. And let me tell you, there's nothing quite like watching someone experience that moment of connection for the first time. Last month, I worked with Sarah, a 22-year-old who'd just been matched with her first guide dog, Belle. Watching her face light up when Belle successfully navigated her first busy intersection. It was like watching someone discover they could fly. I realized that my experience with Humphrey, all of it, the joy and the grief, had given me something to offer. Not just mobility skills, but emotional preparation. The knowledge that this relationship will be the most important of your life. And that it will end, and that both of those things are okay. I'm not ready for another guide dog yet. Maybe someday, but not yet. Right now, I'm rediscovering what it means to be Kate without Humphrey. And you know what? I'm still pretty awesome. So here we are. 2 hours into my story, and I hope you understand now why I wanted to share it. Not because my grief is more important than yours, but because grief is universal. Love is universal. Loss is universal. This harness will never guide me again. But it guided me through the most important relationship of my life. And that relationship, even though it ended, made me who I am today. Now I want to hear from you. I mentioned at the beginning that I'd ask you to share something. Anything that you need to get off your chest. This is that moment. Whether you've lost a pet, a person, a relationship, a dream, a version of yourself you thought you'd be. This is your space. Your grief matters. Your love matters. Your story matters. Who wants to start? What's weighing on your heart tonight? What do you need to say out loud so you don't have to carry it alone? Don't be afraid. We're all just humans who've loved deeply and lost something precious. Your story deserves to be heard. I'll wait. Take your time. Sometimes the most healing thing we can do is break the silence. Thank you for sharing Pet's name story. I can hear how much love you had for each other. That bond, whether it lasted 2 years or 20, it's real and it shaped you. The grief you're feeling is proportional to the love you shared, and that's not something to minimize. Loss is loss and love is love. Whether it's a parent, a partner, a friend, or a guide dog, when someone becomes part of our daily rhythm, part of how we navigate the world, their absence creates a hole that can't be filled by anything else. Thank you for trusting us with their memory. Sometimes the hardest losses are the ones that aren't about death, but about the end of a shared future you thought you'd have. When someone has been your partner in navigating life, figuring out how to do it alone again, it's like learning to walk all over again. When we lose a version of ourselves we thought we'd be, it's a kind of death too. The career that didn't happen, the family you thought you'd have, the health you thought you'd keep. These losses are real, and they deserve to be grieved. What I've learned from all of you tonight, and from my own journey with Humphrey, is that grief isn't the opposite of love. It's love with nowhere to go. But love this deep, love this transformative, it doesn't just disappear. Changes us. It becomes part of who we are. Humphrey taught me that partnership isn't about dependency. It's about interdependence. We made each other better, stronger, more capable of navigating the world. And that lesson didn't die with him. It lives on in how I move through the world now, how I connect with others, how I offer support to people who are where I was 3 years ago. Every person who shared tonight, every story of love and loss, you're carrying forward something precious. The love you gave and received, it's still active in the world. It's in the kindness you show to others, the compassion you have for fellow travelers, the way you honor what you've lost by living more fully. I want to tell you something important. This isn't the end of my story with Humphrey. It's just the end of the chapter where we were physically together. He's still with me every day. In the confidence he gave me, in the navigation skills he taught me, in the way I approach new challenges. This cane isn't a step backward from our partnership. It's a step forward into the next part of my story. A story that's informed by everything Humphrey taught me about courage, about trust, about the power of true partnership. And who knows? Maybe someday there will be another dog. Maybe someday I'll be ready to love that deeply again, to risk that kind of loss for that kind of joy. But if that day comes, it won't be because I've forgotten Humphrey. It'll be because I've honored him by staying open to love. The same is true for all of you. Whatever you've lost, whoever you've lost, the way you honor them is by staying open. By continuing to love, to connect, to risk your heart again when you're ready. So here's what I want you to remember as you leave here tonight. Your grief is valid. Your love is real. Your story matters. And you're not alone. This support group meets every Tuesday at 7 p.m. You don't have to come back, but you're welcome to. Sometimes healing happens in community. Sometimes we need witnesses to our pain and our progress. And if you need to talk, if you need someone who understands that love and loss are two sides of the same coin, I'm here. We're all here. Because that's what people who've loved deeply do. We show up for each other. Humphrey taught me that the most important thing isn't the destination. It's the quality of the journey and the love you share along the way. So wherever you're going from here, whatever your next steps look like, I hope you'll remember that love is never wasted. Even when it ends, even when it hurts, even when it leaves you feeling lost in the dark. Because love is the only thing that lights up the darkness. And all of us, every single one of us, we're carrying that light forward. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for being here. And thank you, Humphrey, wherever you are, for showing me what it means to be truly seen, truly guided, truly loved. Feel free to like and subscribe for more heartfelt stories.